Welcome, everyone. I'm Jen Farmer. I'm the CEO at the Friedreich Ataxia Research Alliance, and I'm joined by Kellen Madden, who is our Director of Patient Engagement. And we are facilitating today a webinar with PTC Therapeutics, and I'm excited to be joined by Matt Klein, who's the CEO at PTC. Matt, thanks for taking the time to meet with the FA community today and share with us an update on the vatiquinone program. Um, for participants joining today, if you have questions, we're happy to take them. There is a Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and you can go into the Q&A box and enter your questions. Kellen will be looking for those. And then try not to use the chat because it's hard for us to monitor both the chat and the Q&A. They're not actually the same thing. So appreciate that. So again, Matt, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Could you start by giving us a little bit of background of PTC Therapeutics? There may be folks joining us for the first time today, and they might not know a lot about PTC.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, first of all, thank you and thank you to FARA for this opportunity and also for what has been over a decade and a half, maybe even longer, of partnership in working to try to get vatiquinone to kids and adults with FA. So thank you and thank FARA so much for the partnership. PTC is a rare disease company. We were founded in 1998, and for the past 28 years, we've been focused on discovering, developing, and then making available commercially therapies for kids and adults with rare diseases. We currently have 6 products that we commercialize around the world in over 50 different countries, again, focused on rare disease. And we have strong research activities um, focused both on neurological and neuromuscular disorders as well as other disorders. And we're about 1,000 individuals at PTC with headquarters in New Jersey and then offices and laboratories around the world.
I didn't realize until just now FARA and PTC were founded in the same year.
1998, exactly right.
It's a good little trivia
That's
question for me.
exactly
I'm putting that on the
right.
way. So Matt, thank you for the intro to PTC, and it's really encouraging to see PTC as a rare disease company. That I think speaks a lot to our community. Can you tell folks a little bit more about vatiquinone and why vatiquinone is being developed as a treatment for FA? Just a little bit of the background there, how the drug works and how that works in the context of FA.
Yeah, absolutely. So vatiquinone, which for those who've been around the story for a long time, was originally known as EPI 743 and then PDC 743. It's a few names, but it's the same therapy. It's an oral therapy. So it's given by mouth. And what it does is it targets the inflammation and stress, oxidative stress that exists in cells in individuals with FA. And the idea is by giving vatiquinone, we're able to decrease inflammation, decrease cell stress, and promote the survival of cells and thus slow the progression of FA. Since it's given orally, it travels everywhere in the body. It gets into the brain, gets into the muscle, and gets into the heart, goes all over the body. And this is a drug that we've been working on for many, many years. We started working on it to treat individuals with diseases of the mitochondria. Because it's a drug that targets the inflammation and stress associated with mitochondrial diseases. And again, things similar to what we see in individuals with Friedreich's ataxia. It's unique also in that for many of the early years, it was studied first in children and then in adults. That's pretty rare for a drug, but what that means is that we have many, many years of safety in children as young as 1 month of age, 1 year of age, as well as adults. So this is really a therapy that we've always envisioned could help all individuals with FA.
And I think you mentioned this, but more broadly, even mitochondrial conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've studied a number of different conditions. And I think one of the things we've been working on this a long time. And I think we were probably this was the first drug when it was with Edison and Bioelectron that before coming to PTC along with me um, was I think the first drug studied in formal placebo-controlled trials of mitochondrial disease. Just this is going back many, many years. And so part of the history of this drug has been in part learning about the drug and then also learning how to study the drug in a lot of different conditions. But we have always prioritized trying to develop this therapy for individuals with FA. We've been working on it for many, many years, and we'll talk about the Prove FA study, which we hope is the final step in getting vatiquinone available for all individuals with FA.
So you mentioned that we've been working on this for a long time, which we have. When I first started at FARA in 2005, we were working on developing the first study for vatiquinone that we at that point were calling EPI 743, as you mentioned. So can you give us an overview of the studies that have been done in FA,
Yeah,
and kind of what we've learned along the way,
yeah.
in terms of how that informs, again, how the drug works, safety, efficacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and I think there's an old saying, it's amazing how many overnight sensations take 25 plus years. And that drug development takes a really long time. And I think the history of vatiquinone speaks to that. So the first individuals with FA were treated as part of a compassionate use study that started in 2009. And that's when we were in the early days of learning about how does the drug work? Will it work? Does it do things that could be meaningful for individuals affected by FA and other mitochondrial diseases? And there were, I believe, two individuals with FA enrolled in that first group of patients we studied with the drug. And what we saw was some early clinical effects as well as some evidence on brain scans and some other tests that we were having an effect on the chemistry of the disease, if you will. Things that would be reflective of inflammation and oxidative stress in the brain looked like they were getting better in two individuals over a short period of time. So really just an early check to say, is the drug doing something that could be helpful in the long run for slowing disease progression? And then also, is it safe? Which we learned the short answer there was yes. And over the many years, vatiquinone has continued to demonstrate to be safe and effective. The next step was to initiate a study where we could more formally assess uh, vatiquinone, and that was done in a 6-month placebo-controlled study in adults, age 18 to 45, ambulatory and non-ambulatory, and that was done at 3 centers in the U.S. and about 61 patients total, or 63 patients, individuals enrolled. And this was again just a question, can we now see in a formal study versus placebo evidence of effect? And we did. We saw benefit relative to placebo, but it did not reach statistical significance. And one of the things we learned, I think the whole community learned, and just to give people an idea, that study ran between 2012 and 2014. This is going back many years. One of the things that everyone learned is that a 6-month study was probably too short to actually see clear benefit because there was a placebo effect. In other words, individuals who didn't get drug but got placebo, we had two individuals who got so much better that it skewed all the scores in a way that kept us from getting statistical significance. So I think that's a lesson that was brought forth, certainly for the team at Reata when they designed the initial OMAV studies, making it 12 months and not 6 months. And again, I think this was an example of everyone learning something important. The
Yeah,
other
we
thing
learned with a few other studies at that time frame, like interferon gamma, I
yeah,
remember was a 6-month study, and hindsight's always 2020.
yeah, absolutely. And but these are the key learn. This is why it takes a long time because a
Yeah,
lot of, you have to make the learnings before you could apply them. But the other thing we did importantly in that study is all the participants continued on drug for 2 years, for a total of 2 years. And what we found over the longer term is there was significant benefit in slowing disease progression relative to a well-matched natural history group from the Fake Homes Registry. And we'll probably talk about it a bunch in this fireside chat. But I think the Friedreich's ataxia community and FARA has long been the model community, one for just bringing everyone together and focusing on research excellence, but also in establishing and characterizing the natural history of the disease. That's so, so important. And we knew this back 10 years ago when we were doing this. And now you can't, everything you hear from FDA and rare diseases, natural history, natural history. Well, FARA has really pioneered this and the incredible work and the dedication, uh, importantly, of the individuals and the affected by FA and their families to participate in research and come in and get annual or semi-annual visits and exams so that we can collect the registry and truly understand the natural history of disease has helped vatiquinone. It's certainly helped OMAV, and I think every therapy in development now for FA is using these data. So, so important. So this was another big lesson we learned. Again, this is 10 years ago. That having that natural history data allowed us over a longer period of time, answer the most important question is, do we see evidence that vatiquinone is slowing disease progression? And the answer was yes. And that gave us then the the confidence to say we need to keep going. We need to now try to design that trial where we can meet the rigor that the regulators FDA wants to see and deliver the therapy across the finish line of approval. So fast forward in this period of time, PTC acquired vatiquinone. Again, I came with it from BioElectron, and the first thing we did was say, okay, we got to get the next FA study up and running, and we spent a lot of time working with physicians and experts and Eugen and Ron and Farah and saying, okay, what's the best study we could design solving for clinical trial success. And the reason I say that is, and we'll come back to this when we talk about Prove FA as well, our goal is to deliver vatiquinone for all individuals affected by FA, especially, anyone who could benefit, we want to have the drug. But one of the things we have to do in a clinical trial is try to set it up so that over still a relatively short period of time, we can see the effect clearly and try to make this study, those who participate in the study, as similar as possible, which in FA is really hard because we know how
Yeah.
different individuals are affected in different ways. So one way we do that is, okay, can we just make the age group smaller? And so, and we also knew that there's less of a placebo effect in younger individuals. So we designed the MOVE FA study to be in individuals primarily age 7 to 21. We did allow several additional individuals who were a bit older, but the main focus was in younger individuals who were ambulatory, again, as a way to try to get a more similar or homogeneous population and give us the best chance for success. Uh, we ran Move FA. It had about 125 individuals. It was an 18-month study. We thought it'd be long enough to make sure there was no placebo effect. And what we found was that we had significant effect on one part of the mFARS, the upright stability subscale. And this was really interesting because this was another learning we made in the trial that I think the community was making at the same time in a lot of the great research by FA investigators led by Christian Rummy, really describing and understanding the natural history that the mFARS scale, which we all use in clinical trials, the four different parts have different relevance at different times in the disease and depending on how long you follow an individual, and such that the upright stability subscale of the mFARS appears to be most sensitive to progression and drug effect in a short period of time in young ambulatory individuals. And that's exactly what we saw. We then again continue to follow folks for additional time and over folks that were treated for 3 years in the MOVE FA extension study. While we showed that we had an overall slowing of progression relative to natural history of about 50%. So in the short term, over 18 months, we had significant effect in slowing progression on upright stability of about 50%, and then the longer term, 50% slowing on the overall mFARS scale because we saw that as we got out to 2 and 3 years, we were now having effect on the other components, the upper limb and lower limb, which again is consistent with the natural history reports that over a longer period of time, you start seeing other parts of the mFARS come in. Now, so just to summarize, we did that study, long placebo-controlled study, significant effect on upright stability. However, when we set the study up in 2019 and 2020, we had said that the primary endpoint, the thing that we would look to make better, was the overall mFARS, not just the one subscale. And so when we took these results that I think we felt very good about, drug safe, it's having an effect on the one part of the disease that mattered most to the study population, and over the long term, we were having significant effect. We took those data to the FDA, and they agreed that we could submit an approval application. Uh, However, in the end, in their review of the application, for statistical reasons, the FDA felt that since we didn't say that the upright stability part of the mFARS would be the main thing that we would look at in the study, they didn't feel the data were strong enough to approve the drug. Despite the fact that there was no approved therapies for those under 16, the drug's safe, and really the community and us included learned while we were doing the study. Had we started the study again, we would focus on upright stability. We didn't, though, because we just didn't have that knowledge at the time. And unfortunately, they just were not convinced enough about that and said that we now need to go and collect additional data so that we could resubmit the approval application, which brings us to today and and the design of that next study.
Matt, thank you. So I saw a few questions starting to come in, and maybe just along the lines of some of the questions, we can kind of reiterate. The MOVE FA study showed an improvement compared to placebo on
Correct.
upright stability. And then over a longer 3-year period during an open label extension, it not only it also showed an improvement compared to natural history on the mFARS. And those are measuring neurologic function for those who aren't familiar with the mFARS. So it looks like vatiquinone is having a beneficial effect on the neurological symptoms of FA as well as the progression of FA. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, and very well said. And then against placebo in the short term, it was had a significant effect on upright stability, and then on the long term overall disease progression uh, by 50%. Yep.
If I remember as well, there was also an improvement in a patient-reported outcome measure of fatigue. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So we looked at a number of different things in the study, and one of them was fatigue, given how important that symptom is to individuals affected by FA, and also things we've heard from people. We hear us all the time that individuals who start on vatiquinone say, I just have more energy. I'm not as tired. I can go through a whole day, at school and not, and things like that. And we did see a significant effect on the fatigue scale, which we shared with the FDA as well, and which they were not, again, it just wasn't enough to convince them to approve the drug.
So we've learned from the prior studies that vatiquinone is safe. We can administer it in individuals of FA at all ages. It's well tolerated, and the primary benefits that we've seen from the studies are improvement of neurological function, slowing of disease, and some improvement in the fatigue symptoms as well. And as you mentioned, kind of not enough to get us to approval with FA. And so they've recommended another study, which we're going to talk about. Maybe before we get to that next study, just two of the questions that have come in that are kind of on the background of vatiquinone before we move forward. Somebody's asking, how is it different from OMAV or Skyclarys? And do we expect that the two will counter each other or maybe work together?
Yeah, so the short answer is both therapies are targeting different parts of inflammation and cell stress. The targets where they're acting specifically in the cell are different, and therefore there's every reason to believe that they could work together because they're attacking a really big problem in FA of inflammation and cell oxidative stress in a different way.
Thank you for that. Another question that somebody's asking is, have we seen in the longer term studies, maybe the 3-year study, this person's asking, does a patient become immune? I think what they mean is like, do they lose the effect?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we've not seen that. We see that let me be clear that the vatiquinone, like Skyclarys and others, doesn't cure FA, which is still, I know, everyone's goal, but we believe it slows progression of FA over time, and that ability to work over time shouldn't go away based on the way the drug works.
And I think what I've also heard from some people along those lines is when you start taking something for longer periods of time, it gets harder to notice the difference because you've kind of got a new baseline. Um, and sometimes I hear from folks that they notice after they stop the medication that,
Yes.
oh yeah, it was actually still doing something, even though I didn't notice it because I became used to kind of a new baseline.
Yeah, we've worked for years with individuals with FA and also in other similar like Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's a very similar story. You can some individuals say I feel these benefits right away. I have more energy and then over time they start saying, well, how do I know my disease progression is being slowed? Because you can't know what you would have done without the therapy, right? And that's what we try to do in the clinical trials, right? That's why we look at the Fake Homes Registry and looks at natural history because we say, look, in this population of thousands of individuals over time, this is what progression looks like year over year over year. And then we'll take individuals on therapy and say, look, that just the trajectory, the progression, the rate, how much you decline and how much function you lose over year, it just looks different. That's why that natural history is so, so important to us because it allows us to say, you may not feel different because you don't know what you'd be like if you didn't have it, but we could tell you that on average, looking at thousands of people, things would be worse.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for answering some of those early questions that came in. It looks like the questions that we're seeing now are on the next phase. So you've kind of given us the background of the studies that have been done and that, FDA is recommending that we do one more study. And I think it's great that the name of it is Prove FA. Good.
Yeah, yeah, the team came up with that. And look, I'll be very clear, on this. We were very disappointed that the drug was not approved. I think it's safe. It has very good evidence that it's working. We believe it's very strong evidence, and the FDA has talked a lot about flexibility for rare diseases, and there's certainly an unmet need for those under 16 with FA, and I think those over 16 with FA deserve treatment options as well, right? It's great that there's an approved therapy, but everyone should have treatment options. So we believe that the data really supported a need for flexibility and approving the drug, but FDA made its decision, and I don't want to say we have to accept that. Um, and
Yeah,
but
maybe just along those lines for folks to know, FARA, PTC was really generous to invite FARA to some of the meetings with FDA, both to submit letters as well as to share the patient experience. So we've been a part of that and been able to try and represent the FA community in those meetings. There was also a really great series of letters put together by community members that FARA facilitated submitting to FDA. So maybe sometimes, some of that stuff kind of happens, a little bit behind the scenes, but the patient was represented, I think, in some of these dialogues and some of these meetings, and certainly with the documents that were assembled by FA community members to bring the patient voice to this process. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop at this point. We're going to keep going. And Matt, I just want to also reiterate, PTC, thank you for not giving up on vatiquinone and for, continuing to push this program forward, even when there have been some headwinds with FDA.
uh, We've said we're in this together, and we can think of nothing else but keep fighting.
Yeah.
Uh, and look, FDA suggested to us that the study that to get more data could be a study where everyone in the trial gets the drug and no one gets placebo. This is very unique. And I think partly that decision was based on understanding the drug is safe, knowing that there was effect. I'd like to believe maybe they know that this was really a close call, and the idea here is just to get some more data showing drugs' effectiveness, and that there wasn't a need to put individuals on placebo. And also, I believe that FDA appreciates the strength of the natural history registry. They've used it before in approval decisions. It was used um, in the Skyclarys decision. And I think they have come to the understanding that if you design a study well and make sure that you apply the right sort of filters to the natural history data, you can get what we like to call an apples to apples comparison. You could have two populations that look really, really similar, with the only difference being that one population gets vatiquinone and one did not. And so we appreciated FDA's flexibility here. I think this was really something we were very grateful to have, because being able to do a study like that, one, we could just get it started quicker. It'll take less time to enroll. The burden on the community is less. I mean, if you're an individual with FA or a parent of an individual with FA, you're not going into a trial saying, okay, it's a 50-50 chance whether I get the drug or not. I might get placebo for the next couple of years, or I might get the drug. Everyone will get the drug. And so that's really great. So Prove FA is a 24-month study, so 2 years. Um, all individuals will get the drug. The primary outcome will be the mFARS scale, the whole scale, given the duration of the study. This will be a global study, so we're going to have study sites all around the US and then around Europe, possibly Australia, New Zealand, Latin America, Canada. So we're going to look to go as wide as we can around the globe, with a few limitations just based on some of the things that FDA wanted us to do in the study. And the inclusion is going to be, based on discussions with the FDA, look like the MOVE FA study. So the last study, which had the primary group of 7 to 21-year-olds, those will be the same criteria here, because the idea is to provide additional data to what we collected in the last study to support that we could resubmit the approval application. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions on the study design and details, so let me just pause there.
So, yeah, there was a question about the inclusion criteria and another question related to, and I think you reviewed that really well. So it's going to be 7 to 21-year-olds with FA. One question was whether or not folks would be able to also take Skyclarys. So for the 16 and older folks in that group, would they be able to take Skyclarys or continue taking it?
So really good question. Unfortunately, well, let me just say again, this is a study design that when we no, with no placebo, which has a lot of benefits, but also comes with it a few restrictions. Since the natural history won't have anything, it won't have a whole bunch of individuals who've been on Skyclarys. We can't include Skyclarys in the trial, because we have to make sure that anyone who goes in the trial and gets vatiquinone, we have to make sure there's enough individuals in the natural history that would have been on Skyclarys for the same amount of time as those in the trial. So and it sounds like a small thing, but it was actually a very important consideration when we set up the trial, that we make sure that we have as many natural history individuals as possible to compare with those folks in the trial. And Skyclarys just hasn't been around long enough to make that possible.
Um, Maybe along those lines. So we've talked about the inclusion criteria, the trial design. When should folks look to see the study opening?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the timeline? Where are we there?
So we're looking to move as quickly as possible. We've said in the third quarter of the year. The third quarter goes from July to September, so probably closer to the back part of the third quarter, we should be up and running. We're going to continue to have more information about
Thank you. So few questions I'm seeing. One is from Ellen Smith-Rovich. She's asking about cardiac issues. And so we all know cardiac conditions and progression of cardiac disease is common in FA. And so what's known about vatiquinone in the context of the cardiac disease of FA?
So we've not studied that closely. In the early studies, we did do some echocardiogram work, but it was a very short amount of time. So it's not something that we have focused on exclusively to study it in the trial. We will say that I think as we understand more and more about the cardiac issues in FA, the inflammation, oxidative stress processes, including something called ferroptosis, is present in the heart cells. That is something that vatiquinone targets. So we don't have the data showing that it has an effect there, but we also haven't looked for it. So, but we do have a belief that it should impact all different aspects of FA progression. But that would be something that we would have to study more closely to define and confirm.
Thanks. Another question kind of related to outcomes, this one more related to the neurologic outcomes and using upright stability and mFARS. This person is mentioning that, another really relevant outcome for individuals with FA is not just their upright stability, is also their transfers. A lot of people spend several years going through that process of being partially ambulatory, using a wheelchair for assistance, and those transfers back and forth from chair to bed or to toilet to wherever is really important. And so is there anything that PTC is planning to look at in the upcoming trial, or anything we could maybe think about adding that would characterize transfers and the quality of those?
Yeah, it's a really good question because that is something that's I know, incredibly important. So I'll say that we don't have an endpoint yet specifically looking at that. I think we would have to say, okay, if we're having an effect on overall neuromuscular function and energy, that should help. I think that's definitely something we need to look at over time. Um, it's really hard when we design a clinical study. So this clinical study is being designed specifically to say, okay, can we get some additional data on top of what we saw in the last trial to get the drug approved? That's why we're focusing on 7 to 21-year-olds that are ambulatory. We still hope to have other studies, other opportunities to enroll individuals who are not in that age group, individuals who are non-ambulatory. We know there's a really unmet need there. And I think, this the need to continue to gather evidence and understand how the drug is working won't stop with this trial. It's something that we would continue to do. And that's a really excellent question. And it's really, I think, just not to get too philosophical on it, but this is one of the major challenges we have in drug development, which is trials are set up to meet sort of objective endpoints where there's scores and scales that are well developed so that regulators can be convinced to approve a drug. And they don't always get at exactly what sometimes can matter most to an individual with the disease. And Jen, this was your point. This is why the patient perspective and talking to FDA and increasing awareness is so important, because the experience of an individual with FA can never be captured in a scale, right? I mean, you can't do that. And this is just one of the challenges we have in trying to get the data that the regulators want to see to approve a drug, knowing there's so much more that needs to be understood and how a therapy can impact individuals.
And we struggle with this every time there's a new trial in FA in terms of you don't want to overburden people as well, or you don't
Yeah.
want to make the trial more complex. Every time we add another assessment, another outcome, another test, it makes the trial more complex. And so we initially start, I think, a lot of times by thinking really big and like put lots and lots of things into the trial design, and then slowly realize, oh, we have to pare this back. Like this is,
You
and,
know, that was
and so it's always it's really hard. Um,
that was one of our take-home lessons. We talked about the trial years ago. The 2012
yeah,
trial, that was one of our key learnings. So we said that it was 6 months was too short, but we put every endpoint possible in there because there were so many things we wanted to look at. And what we found out, the study visits were so difficult. And then we were wearing people out. So individuals participating in the trial, we were doing so much that it would be fatiguing just being in the study.
yeah.
And so that also adds a level of complexity to the study and also makes it hard to tell if a drug's working because if you're putting people, having, going to a study site, you have to find, where am I going to be there overnight? I have to find parking. Then how far is it from the parking lot to get to the clinic? Then I got to go to the speech therapist. Then I go to the hearing therapy. Then I got to go to the echo. I mean, all of that really has the burden, as you said, is really important.
Let's see. I've got a few more questions here. One from Elizabeth is asking about kind of the link between trial participation and then post-approval access to the drug. And it made me think of one question. So for the folks who are in Move FA, um, are they still getting access to vatiquinone, and kind of what would be the plan for folks who then enter Prove FA?
Yeah, so we have typically continued folks on therapy, so long as we're still developing the therapy. And so the individuals who were in Move FA then consented to participate in the Move FA extension. Many of them are still on therapy. And in fact, in that study, we've allowed Skyclarys as well. So we'll have the opportunity to have some data on certainly safety and tolerability of the two together. And so that study is still ongoing. And at the end of Prove FA, our plan is to have a long-term extension study as well. That's just something we've traditionally done.
And then, there's always a delay between the end of a trial and approval by FDA and then access kind of in the real world. How does PTC think about navigating that? And are there things that you're kind of doing with these trials to help promote access? I think that's the second half of Beth's question.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, for one, for those who are in the trial, you tend to have continued access so long as you continue in the trial until you're able to then get onto commercial therapy. And I think one of the benefits we have at PTC of having worked in so many different rare diseases and commercialized rare diseases drugs for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. We have a drug for PKU and others. Is we start working on access for those not in trials as early as possible to try to, make as few barriers as possible and limit the time from approval for individuals to get on a therapy.
Um, there are a few questions here that I think are pretty straightforward, but I think good ones just related to eligibility for Prove FA. Um, One is you mentioned that people would not be able to take Skyclarys while they're in Prove FA. If they're currently taking Skyclarys, could they stop it? Is there a washout period? I think is what that question's asking.
There's some specific criteria around how long you were on Skyclarys because we know there's folks who were on it for a few weeks and then came off. And so there are parameters there based on how long you're on it, how long you have to wash out. So I would say the best thing to do is to be in touch with once we have the sites visible. And I know that on the chat, patient engagement at PTC Bio engagement email is there, which is a great way to reach out to us to get more information on study sites and things. And that's a best have that conversation with your FA physician or the FA investigator to if you'd be what those timelines are and what's the best thing for you and what would be most safe for you.
And there are two questions related to the age, and I think they're probably asking something similar, which is, it's 7 to 21. Could people age out, or would they continue? So I guess this person's thinking of someone who might be 20 when they enroll. It's a 2-year study. They'll be 22 when it ends. I think I know the answer to the question, but maybe you can just reassure this person that
Yeah.
you're still in the study.
You're still in the study. Reassured. Yeah. So usually those criteria are at time of study entry. So it's 7 to 21 at the time that you enter the study.
Yeah. So
If you turn 22 in the study, if you turn 23 in the study, as long as you were between those 7 and 21 when you enrolled in the study, you're good.
all right. So you could be 21 and 364 days when you enroll.
Just plan carefully.
And very
Everything.
carefully,
Yeah.
yes. Well, great. Another question related to this kind of a study design kind of question, but along with mFARS, will upright stability still be an endpoint? Like, will there be like co-endpoints or things like that related to the study design?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time thinking exactly, of course, because of the issues we had not getting approved based on what seemed like something that shouldn't have been a barrier to getting approval. We wanted to make sure we were super thoughtful about this. And given the fact that the study length is going to be 24 months, which is long, um, and based on what has been published about natural history and what we understand, we are going with the overall mFARS as the primary endpoint. So we will collect each of the subscales and look at them separately as individual endpoints. But we're using the whole scale as the primary endpoint, just based on the study design and our belief with 24 months, that should give us the best chance for success.
Um, All right. A few more questions here. Just you mentioned that vatiquinone's an oral medication, so pills that participants are swallowing. It sounds like maybe this person was in a study previously, but how many pills are taken each day of vatiquinone?
So right now there are capsules that are 200 milligrams each. So you take two at a time with basically breakfast, lunch, dinner, 3 times a day with food.
Okay. Are there options if kids have trouble swallowing those pills or?
Yeah, so I'd say if the younger patients will take one a day, 3 times a day, based on your age and your
Okay.
weight, whether you take one or two. So and then the capsules should be of a size at which folks should be able to younger folks in the trials should be able to swallow. That was an important consideration. Ultimately, if we were in a situation where we could get the drug approved, we also have the ability to have a solution or a liquid as well that for even younger individuals. Those are things that we've used for kids that are 1, 2, 3, 4 years old in some of our other studies. But for this, again, just um, following what we did in Move FA, we're going to have the same capsules, same dosing regimen of 1 or 2, 3 times a day.
Thanks, Matt. This question came up last week when we were at the um, FA research reception in Oklahoma City during the Q&A. And it was about individuals who are at later stages of FA or older ages who would not qualify for Prove FA. Will there be kind of any additional open label studies or options for later stage individuals to contribute to research or have open label compassionate use type access?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, for this main study, we really, in discussions with FDA, we're limited to the criteria we used for the last study, but we are absolutely going to look at trying to open up other studies, other opportunities so that those who maybe more have more advanced disease, be not ambulatory or age groups that older than in the study could possibly participate. I mean, we learned from the first study years ago that we had individuals up to age 45, those that were non-ambulatory and saw benefits there. Dr. Z at University of South Florida many years ago did a very small study with individuals who had point mutations that included those who were um, some of them were older than the 45 age limit we had in the first study that she reported benefit there. So, we definitely, as I said, we intend this to be something that could help as many individuals as possible. A lot of the trial design is just focused on getting that sort of, I'd say, the narrow part of the hourglass, get through that so we can get approval so we can make it available more widely. That's absolutely the intention.
Thanks, Matt. I think that means a lot to folks. The two more questions. This last one, this question here, I think is hard for us to answer, but maybe as a rare disease company, you've got learnings from other diseases that you can guide us on, which is, Skyclarys is our first approved drug, and if we can get vatiquinone across the finish line with FA, and we have two approved drugs, what should we anticipate from the access side from insurance companies? Like, will there be challenges getting them to approve two drugs? Are there things, and I would just follow it up with what else could we be doing as a community to prepare
Yeah.
for a place where, because we know we need a cocktail of treatments. It's not going to be one treatment
Yeah.
is going to cure the disease. So, if you have advice for us from other and learnings from other diseases, that could be really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, first of all, I was gonna start with saying how genuine, Ron, for years, as long as I've known you, have talked about like every other complex disease, we're going to need a cocktail approach. We're going to need things that target stress and inflammation, things that can target frataxin, genetic, all of that. And so I think first, just continuing to formalize that thinking in publications, and this is where the field of FA is, that we're going to need that really helps. The other is, I mean, I think Duchenne muscular dystrophy is a great example of where there's individuals on two or three drugs, and I think that's a good model. The spinal muscular atrophy, there's individuals who've been on one, gone. There's three
And in
approved.
those cases, the insurance is paying for multiple
Yep.
approved
Yep.
therapies, I
Yep.
think.
And now look, I'll be honest, I think everyone knows this. It's going to vary payer by payer. And insurance companies, a lot of times, they'll put barriers up that we collectively as a community, because we're all part of it. The company, the prescribers, the patient advocacy, patient support have to work together to make sure we state the case of why these things can work together and why that's so important.
So, last question is one that has certainly been on my mind for a few days now, because we've seen in the news that several of the rare diseases that got turned down by FDA last year, Huntington's disease and another rare disease just announced this morning, Hunter syndrome, that FDA is kind of coming back and saying, oh, we'll accept a resubmission now, that, the original data that you had was acceptable, and we'll take a second look and you can resubmit your application. And so is there an opportunity for us to ask FDA to reconsider?
Yeah. Well, look, it won't surprise you. I've been working on this a long time, and I've made the pledge that I won't stop till we get where we need to go. Um, and and look, first things first, I think we're grateful that FDA gave us this opportunity to do this study in a format that's less burdensome for everyone, specifically and most importantly for the individual trial participants. That being said, I've been very clear on this as I've been in this conversation, as I've been in other conversations, that, I believe the drug should have been approved. And so if there is an opportunity to resubmit while we do this study as a confirmatory study. We're open. Look, I'm open to anything that would get this drug to more individuals with FA sooner. If I had a magic wand, this is easy. I wave it and it's done. We know it's not that simple. Jen, I'll commit to working with you in the community to see if there is an opportunity. We'll look at it. In the meantime, let's get this study up and running because
Yep,
I think we're in a
that's,
good place to have this as the option, you know, option A. And if we can get option B and get them to reconsider it sooner, the study will need to be done anyway. So let's keep getting that up and enrolled. And in fact, I'd argue the more progress we make in getting that study up and enrolled, the easier it is to go back and say, "Hey, we gave us this additional study. We're going to do it, but in the meantime, let's approve the drug conditionally."
yeah.
So that would be a wonderful thing. I can't promise that's going to happen, but again, if there was that opportunity, we'd obviously look at it.
Well, thank you for that. And I think there are already comments coming in from community members that they're grateful that there might be an opportunity to go back again and support. And so FARA will, I'll say FARA will commit to doing our part to make sure that, if there's that opportunity to go back, that the community is engaged and involved and can be a part of making that request. So.
And it's always hard to know what's gone on. Every community, every drug, every program, every FDA interaction is different, and
Yeah.
so
They are. And some of those recent decisions are in a different part of FDA. They're in the Center for Biologics. We're in the Center for Drugs. So there are some differences there, as you mentioned. So it's not always apples to apples. It's a good reminder. Well, Matt, really grateful for you taking the time to meet with us today and give us such a great update and have a chat kind of on where we've been with vatiquinone and where we're going with Prove FA. Thanks to all the community members who joined today for your great questions. And everybody kind of be on the lookout for updates on how to participate in Prove FA and next steps for the program as a whole.
yeah. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.